I, 30F, stood in the middle of my own living room. The air was thick with the scent of vanilla cake and cheap perfume. Balloons, mostly purple and silver, crowded the ceiling. People were laughing. They were drinking wine from plastic cups. It was my 30th birthday party. My mother, Diana, had insisted on planning it. She said it was a milestone. She said it needed to be celebrated properly. I had wanted a quiet dinner with a few friends. Instead, I got this. A house full of relatives and neighbors I barely knew. My mother stood by the gift table, her back straight and her smile tight. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. My sister Clara was beside her. Clara was not really my sister, but everyone called her that. She was my parents' biological daughter. I was adopted. This was a fact. Like the sky being blue, but it was a fact my mother never let me forget. Clara was the real daughter. I was the other one. Diana tapped a fork against her wine glass. The chatter in the room slowly died down. Everyone turned to look at her. She loved an audience. She raised her glass, the crystal catching the light. "A toast," she announced. Her voice was smooth and clear. "To my daughter, Ava." I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. She never called me her daughter unless she was in public. It was always just for show. 30 years old, Diana continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing on me. It is a big number, a time for reflection. She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Some people live a full life in 30 years. They do everything they need to do. They serve their purpose. My hands felt cold. What was she talking about? This was not a normal birthday toast. She looked directly at me. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "You have lived enough," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. Silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. I stared at her, trying to understand. Had I heard her correctly? Lived enough? What did that mean? It sounded like an ending. It sounded like a dismissal. Then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Clara. She was looking at my mother, and she was smiling. It was not a happy smile. It was a small, knowing smirk, a smile of satisfaction, like she was in on a secret, a cruel secret. My heart started beating faster. This was not just a strange comment. This was something else, something planned. My mother's words and my sister's smile were connected. I felt a wave of nausea. I had to get out of there. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I forced a smile. "For the interesting toast." I turned and walked toward the kitchen. I needed a glass of water. I needed to breathe. I could feel their eyes on my back. As I pushed through the swinging door, I heard my mother's light laughter. "Oh, she is so sensitive," she said to the room. "Takes everything so seriously." In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter. My hands were shaking. Lived enough. The words echoed in my head. It was not a joke. It was a declaration. But a declaration of what? I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. My face was pale. My eyes were wide with a fear I did not yet understand. Clara's smile was burned into my mind. She knew. She knew what it meant. And she was happy about it. I had spent my entire life trying to be a good daughter, a good sister. I had followed all the rules. I had stayed quiet. I had made myself small to make them feel big. For what? To be told at my own birthday party that my time was up? I decided right then. I was done being quiet. I was done being small. I would find out what that comment meant. I would find out why Clara smiled. And whatever it was, I would not let them get away with it. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a fight. My dad, Robert, walked into the kitchen then. He looked worried. "Ava, are you all right?" he asked. "What did she mean by that, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. You know your mother, he said. She likes to be dramatic. She did not mean anything by it. She meant something, I insisted. And Clara knew what she meant. I saw her smile. My dad would not meet my eyes. He started fiddling with the faucet. Clara is just, you know how she is. She finds everything amusing. No, I said, shaking my head. This was different. This felt cruel. He turned off the water and finally looked at me. His eyes were full of something I could not name. Pity? Guilt? Please, Ava, he said softly. Just let it go. For me, do not make a scene. Do not make a scene. That was his answer for everything. My whole life was about not making a scene, not questioning, not pushing back. I always did as he asked, but not this time. I cannot let it go, I told him. I need to know what is going on. He looked defeated. There is nothing going on, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my fear and my new cold resolve. I knew he was lying, and I knew that to find the truth, I was completely on my own. The party ended an hour later. I smiled and thanked everyone for coming. I opened presents and pretended to be delighted, but inside I was a coiled spring. As soon as the last guest left, Diana and Clara started cleaning up, chattering happily about how well the party had gone. Everyone had a wonderful time, Diana said, stacking plates. Mrs. Gable said it was the best party she had been to all year. Of course it was, Clara said, fluffing her hair. You planned it. They moved around my small apartment like they owned it. I stood by the door watching them. They did not speak to me. They spoke around me as if I were a piece of furniture. I am tired, I said finally. I am going to bed. Diana looked up, surprised. So early? But we have not finished cleaning. You can leave it, I said. I will do it in the morning. Nonsense, she said, waving a dismissive hand. We will finish. You go ahead. You have had a big day. There it was again. That strange emphasis. A big day. The end of something. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I did not go to bed. I sat on the edge of my mattress and listened to them. Their voices were muffled, but their tone was clear. They were cheerful, triumphant. I heard them leave about 30 minutes later. The front door clicked shut. Silence filled the apartment. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. The first thing I did was walk back into the living room. They had cleaned everything. The plates were washed. The trash was taken out. My apartment was spotless, as if the party had never happened. As if I had never turned 30. It felt like they were wiping the slate clean, erasing me. I sat on my sofa and thought, what could it be? What could "you have lived enough" possibly mean? Was it about money? I did not have much. I worked a steady job as a librarian. I lived simply. My parents were comfortable but not wealthy. My grandparents, however, had been. They passed away years ago. I remembered a trust. Something that was supposed to be mine when I turned 30. My parents had always been vague about it. It is all taken care of, my mother would say whenever I asked. You do not need to worry your pretty little head about it. Could it be about the trust? Maybe the money was not there. Maybe they had spent it. And now that I was 30, the day of reckoning had come. Maybe lived enough meant I had lived on their charity long enough, and now I was on my own. That was bad, but it did not feel dark enough. It did not explain the look in my mother's eyes, or the coldness of her words. It did not explain Clara's smile. I needed to see the trust documents. I had never seen them. My parents kept all important papers in a safe at their house. A big, old iron safe in my father's study. I had no idea what the combination was. The next morning, I called my friend Sarah. She was the only one I had told about being adopted. She was the only one who understood the strange dynamics of my family. She said what? Sarah asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. You have lived enough, I repeated. The words tasted like poison. Ava, that is horrible, she said. That is not just mean. That is unsettling. I know, I said. And Clara smiled, like she was thrilled. Okay, Sarah said, her voice turning practical. We need to figure this out. You mentioned a trust fund before, right? From your grandparents? Yes, I said. I get it now that I am 30. And your birthday was yesterday, Sarah pointed out. The timing is too perfect. This has to be about the money. I think so too, I agreed. But how do I find out for sure? The documents are in a safe at their house. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Your dad's study, right? Sarah asked. The one with the window that faces the garden? Yes, I said, confused. Why? Does he still forget to lock it? She asked. A memory sparked. When we were teenagers, we used to sneak out through that window to go to parties. My dad was always forgetting to latch it properly. I do not know, I said slowly. I have not checked in years. Well, Sarah said, her voice full of determination. Maybe it is time for a late-night visit to your parents' house. The thought terrified me. Breaking into my own parents' house? But what choice did I have? They had left me with no other options. They had drawn a line in the sand with that single, cruel sentence. I cannot do it alone, I whispered. You will not be, Sarah said firmly. I will be right there with you. That night, we drove to my parents' neighborhood. We parked a block away and walked the rest of the way. The house was dark. My parents always went to bed by 10. It was almost midnight. The street was quiet. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the cool night air. We crept around to the back of the house. The garden was overgrown. My mother always complained about the cost of a gardener. We reached the window to my father's study. I held my breath and pushed gently. The window slid open with a soft groan. He had forgotten to lock it. Sarah gave me a thumbs up. I will wait out here, she whispered. Be quick. I climbed through the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I landed softly on the plush carpet of the study. The room smelled of old books and my father's pipe tobacco. The moonlight streaming through the window cast long shadows across the room. The safe was in the corner, a dark, imposing square. I knew I could not open the safe itself. But my father was a man of habit. He was also forgetful. I started searching his desk. I pulled open the drawers, one by one. Pens, paper clips, old bills. Nothing. I checked under the desk blotter. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed a framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and my mother on their wedding day. It was the only photo in the study that did not include me or Clara. On a whim, I picked it up. Taped to the back was a small folded piece of paper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. On it was a series of numbers. It had to be the combination. I knelt in front of the safe. My hands were slick with sweat. I took a deep breath and began to turn the dial. Right to the first number, left to the second. Right again. I pulled the handle. The heavy door swung open. Inside were stacks of folders and envelopes. I used the flashlight on my phone to read the labels. Insurance, taxes, deeds. And then I saw it. A thick manila envelope with my name, Ava, written on it in my mother's neat, sharp handwriting. My hands shook as I pulled it out. I did not open it there. I tucked it into my jacket, closed the safe, and spun the dial to lock it. I put the photo with the combination back on the desk, exactly where I had found it. Then I climbed back out the window. Sarah was waiting for me, her face pale in the darkness. Did you get it? She whispered. I nodded, patting my jacket. I think so. We did not talk on the drive back to my apartment. I held the envelope in my lap, its weight feeling both heavy and liberating. When we got inside, I locked the door behind us and we both sat at my kitchen table. Are you ready? Sarah asked gently. I took a deep breath. Yes. I tore open the envelope. Inside were several official-looking documents, stapled together. The top page was a letter from a law firm. It was dated a few weeks after I was born. But it was the document underneath that made my blood run cold. It was my original birth certificate, and the name of the mother listed was not Diana. It was a name I had never seen before. A woman named Elena. But that was not the most shocking part. I scanned the page, my eyes searching for my father's name. It was not there. The space for the father's name was blank. I looked again at the mother's full name, Elena Reyes, and then at the bottom of the certificate, I saw something that made me gasp. A small handwritten note in the margin. It was from my grandfather. It said, "Her daughter. Protect her." Her daughter? Whose daughter? I was confused. Then I remembered something. My grandmother's maiden name. It was Reyes. Elena Reyes was my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt. I was not just some random baby they adopted. I was family. I was my great-aunt's daughter. Why had they lied? Why pretend I was a stranger? I kept reading. The next set of papers were the adoption records. Everything looked official. Signed by my parents. Signed by a judge. But then I saw another name. A witness signature. It was my mother's brother, my Uncle Peter. He had always been cold to me. Now I understood why. He was in on the lie from the beginning. The final document was the one I was looking for. The trust. It was from my maternal grandparents. It was long and full of legal language, but the core of it was simple. They had left a significant amount of money in a trust for me. The document specified that I was to gain full, unrestricted access to the principal and all accrued interest on my 30th birthday. I scanned the pages, looking for the catch, and then I found it. A single clause on the third page. In the event that the beneficiary, Ava, should pass away prior to her 30th birthday, or fail to claim the trust within 90 days following her 30th birthday, the trust shall be dissolved, and its assets shall be absorbed into the main family estate. The main family estate, which was controlled by my mother, Diana. I dropped the papers on the table. Oh my God, I whispered. What is it? Sarah asked, leaning forward. If I die, I said, my voice shaking. If I die, they get everything. All of it. You have lived enough. The words came back to me, no longer just cruel, but terrifying. It was not a metaphor. It was not a dismissal. It was a threat, a statement of intent. They did not just want me out of the way. They wanted me gone. For good. Sarah read the clause herself. Her face went white. Ava, she said, her voice low. This is not just a family drama anymore. This is dangerous. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear was still there, but it was now joined by a cold, hard anger. They had been playing a long game, a 30-year game. They had taken me in not out of love, but as an investment that was about to mature, and they were ready to cash out. What do I do? I asked, looking at Sarah. The first thing you do is claim that trust, she said immediately. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you walk into that bank and you transfer every single penny into a new account at a different bank. An account that only you control. She was right. That was the first step. Secure the money. Take away their motive. And then? I asked. Sarah's eyes were dark. And then you make them pay. The next morning, I was at the bank 10 minutes before it opened. I had the trust documents in my bag. My hands were sweating. I felt like a criminal, but I was the one who had been wronged. I was just taking back what was mine. The bank manager, a kind-faced man named Mr. Henderson, was the one who handled the trust. He had sent me a polite letter a month ago, reminding me that the trust would mature on my birthday. A letter my mother must have intercepted. Miss Ava, he said, smiling warmly as I sat down in his office. Happy belated birthday. I was expecting you yesterday. I had a family celebration, I said, my voice even. I was surprised at how calm I sounded. Of course, he said. Well, everything is in order. It is a substantial sum. Your grandparents were very generous and very specific with their instructions. He slid a folder across the desk. This is the final statement. All it requires is your signature to transfer the funds into an account of your choosing. I looked at the number on the page. It was more money than I had ever imagined. Enough to live on for the rest of my life. Enough to be free. I would like to close the trust today, I said. And I want to transfer the entire amount to a new account, at a different bank. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow slightly, but he remained professional. Very well, he said. That is certainly your prerogative. Do you have the details for the new account? I did. Sarah had helped me set one up online the night before. I gave him the information. He typed for a few minutes, then printed out a series of forms. Just sign here, here, and here, he said. I signed my name. My hand was steady. With each signature, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was taking control. The transfer will be initiated immediately, Mr. Henderson said, gathering the papers. It should be complete by the end of the day. Congratulations, Miss Ava. Your grandparents would be very happy. Thank you, I said. I stood up, feeling taller than I had in my entire life. As I walked out of the bank, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, a text message appeared. Call me immediately. It is urgent. I smiled. The game had begun. I did not go home. I went to a small cafe and ordered a coffee. I needed to think. I had the money. That was step one. But Sarah was right. That was not enough. They could not be allowed to get away with 30 years of lies and with what they had been planning. I needed more than just the financial documents. I needed proof of their intent. Something that would expose them for who they really were. I thought about my great-aunt, Elena, the mother on my birth certificate. My grandfather's note said, protect her. Why did she need protection? What had happened to her? I had never heard of a great-aunt Elena. My mother's family was small. Just her and her brother, Peter. I decided my next step was to find out what happened to Elena Reyes. My search started online. I typed her name into a search engine. I found a few mentions of her in old society pages from decades ago, linked to my grandparents. She was at their wedding. She was at a charity ball. And then nothing. She just disappeared from public record around the time I was born. There was no obituary, no marriage announcement. It was like she had vanished. I decided to call the one person who might know the truth. The one person who had always looked at me with a sad, knowing expression. My father's sister, my Aunt June. Aunt June lived a few hours away. She and my mother did not get along. Diana called her provincial. June called Diana a snake. They only saw each other at mandatory family holidays. I called her. She answered on the second ring. Ava, is everything all right, dear? She asked, her voice warm and concerned. I need to ask you something, Aunt June, I said. It is important. Anything, she said. Do you know who Elena Reyes is? I asked. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her take a slow, shaky breath. Where did you hear that name? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I found my original birth certificate, I said. She was my mother. Oh, Ava, she breathed. Oh, you poor child. I always knew this day would come. What happened to her, Aunt June? I pressed. Why did I end up with Diana and Robert? It is a long, ugly story, she said. And not one for the phone. Can you come see me? I am on my way, I said. The drive to Aunt June's house felt like a journey into my own past. I was finally going to get some answers. When I arrived, she was waiting for me on her front porch, wringing her hands. She hugged me tightly. Come inside, she said. I will make us some tea. We sat in her cozy kitchen. The room smelled of cinnamon and cloves. She placed a steaming mug in front of me. Elena was your grandmother's younger sister, she began. She was beautiful, full of life, but she was fragile. She fell in love with a man your grandparents did not approve of. He was a musician. He had no money, no prospects. They forbade her from seeing him, but she was stubborn. She got pregnant. I listened, my hands wrapped around the warm mug. This was my story. My beginning. Your grandparents were horrified, June continued. It was a scandal. They sent Elena away to a private sanitarium to have the baby in secret. That baby was you. What about the father? I asked. He disappeared, she said with a sad shake of her head. No one knows what happened to him. Some say he just ran off. Others say your grandfather paid him to leave. And Elena? I prompted. What happened to her after I was born? Aunt June's eyes filled with tears. That is the ugliest part of it all. After you were born, she had a breakdown. Postpartum depression, they call it now. But back then, they just called it hysteria. Diana convinced your grandparents that Elena was an unfit mother. That the best thing for you and for the family's reputation was for you to be raised by a stable couple. So she and my dad adopted me. I finished. They did, June confirmed. And they made Elena sign the papers. They promised they would love you like their own. They promised Elena she could be a part of your life. An aunt. But it was all a lie. What do you mean? I asked. Once the adoption was final, Diana cut Elena off completely, she said, her voice laced with old anger. She told everyone Elena had moved away. She intercepted her letters. She refused her calls. She erased her. Your great-aunt spent years trying to see you, but Diana was a fortress. The cruelty of it stole my breath. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to care for me, had been stolen from me. Where is she now? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Is she still alive? Aunt June looked down at her hands. She passed away about 10 years ago, honey. A heart condition. I think it was a broken heart, mostly. Tears streamed down my face. I was crying for a mother I never knew, for a life I never had. Diana did one more thing, June said, her voice low and hard. She and your Uncle Peter went to your grandparents. They knew your grandparents had a soft spot for Elena. And for you. They convinced them to set up the trust. They said it was to protect your future. But they made sure that clause was in there. The one about what happens if you do not make it to 30. So they planned this? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. They planned this for 30 years? Diana is a patient woman when it comes to money, June said bitterly. She saw you as a winning lottery ticket, one she just had to wait to cash in. I finally understood. The lies, the coldness, the constant reminders that I was not a real daughter. It was all part of the plan. To keep me separate, to make me feel worthless, to make it easier for them to do whatever they were planning to do when I turned 30. There is something else you should know, Aunt June said, getting up from the table. She went to a small writing desk in the corner and came back with a small wooden box. Elena gave this to me before she died, she said, her hands trembling as she opened it. She told me to give it to you if you ever came looking for the truth. Inside the box was a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to me. For Ava, was written on the top one in a beautiful, looping script. She wrote to you every year on your birthday, June said softly. She never stopped loving you. I spent the rest of the afternoon at Aunt June's house reading my mother's letters. They were full of love and longing. She told me about her life, about my father, the musician, about her dreams for me. She told me how much she missed me. With every word I read, a piece of my broken heart began to heal, while another piece hardened against Diana and her family. In the last letter, written just before she died, Elena had included something else. A key and a note. This is to a storage unit, she wrote. I kept everything. The letters Diana sent back, the recordings of her phone calls, proof of her cruelty. Your grandfather knew what she was. He helped me gather it. He said protect her because he knew Diana was a danger to you. Use it, my darling girl. Get your justice. Live the life they tried to steal from you. I held the key in my hand. It was heavy. It was the key to everything. I drove back to my city that evening, the box of letters on the seat beside me. I had a plan. A clear, cold plan. I was not just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle their entire world. The storage unit was in an industrial part of the city I had never been to. It was one of those big, anonymous places with rows and rows of metal doors. I found the unit number from Elena's note. The key slid into the lock and turned easily. I rolled up the metal door. The air inside was stale and dry. It was filled with boxes. I opened the first one. It was full of returned letters. Stamped across the front in red ink was "Return to Sender." These were the letters Elena had sent me, all rejected by Diana. The next box contained cassette tapes. Dozens of them. Each one was labeled with a date. I found a small old cassette player in another box and pressed play on the first tape. A crackling sound, and then I heard my mother's voice. Young, sharp, and cruel. You will not see her, Elena, she was saying. She is my daughter now. You are nothing. You are a ghost. Then I heard another voice. A woman's voice, pleading, broken. Diana, please, just one picture, just to know she is okay. She is more than okay, Diana snapped. She is going to make this family very wealthy, so you see, you did serve a purpose after all. The tape clicked off. I sat there in the dusty storage unit, surrounded by the evidence of my mother's monstrousness, and I felt no sadness, only a burning, righteous fury. She had not just stolen my mother from me, she had stolen my inheritance from her. The trust was likely meant for Elena, but Diana had manipulated her own parents into giving it to me, with a deadly catch. I spent hours in that unit, going through everything. There were financial records, copies of letters between Diana and her brother, Peter, discussing the Ava problem and how to manage the asset until she turned 30. There were even diary entries from my grandfather, detailing his growing mistrust of his own daughter. Diana's ambition frightens me, he had written. She looks at the child not with love, but with calculation. I have made a terrible mistake. I must find a way to protect the girl. He had tried. He had helped Elena gather this proof, but he had died before he could use it. Now, it was up to me. I packed up the most damning evidence. The returned letters, the tapes, the copies of Diana's correspondence with Peter. I knew exactly what I was going to do. A few days later, I called my mother. Ava, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. I have been calling you for days. Where have you been? The bank manager called. He said you closed the trust. I did, I said calmly. It is my money after all. How dare you, she hissed. After everything we have done for you. We raised you. We fed you. We gave you a home. You gave me a cage, I said, my voice cold. And you were waiting for me to turn 30 so you could collect on your investment. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I do not know what you are talking about, she finally said, but her voice was shaky. Oh, I think you do, I said. I know about Elena. I know you stole my mother from me. I know you stole her inheritance. And I know what you meant when you said I had lived enough. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. It did not matter. I had said what I needed to say. I had planted the seed of fear. Now, it was time to let it grow. The next day, I sent a package to my Uncle Peter. Inside was a copy of one of the letters he had written to Diana, discussing how to handle the situation if I started asking questions about the trust before my birthday. I included a simple note. I know everything. We need to talk. He called me within the hour. He was panicking. What is this, Ava? He blustered. What kind of game are you playing? It is not a game, Uncle Peter, I said. It is my life, the one you and Diana have been gambling with for 30 years. I did not do anything, he said quickly. That was all, Diana. I was just trying to keep the peace. You were an accomplice, I said flatly. You signed the adoption papers as a witness to a lie. You helped her plan this. I have the proof. All of it. I could hear him breathing heavily. What do you want? He asked, his voice small. I want a statement, I said. A full written confession of everything you and Diana did. Starting with how you convinced my grandparents to create the trust with that clause in it, and ending with what you plan to do now that I am 30. I cannot do that, he whispered. She is my sister. She is your sister, I agreed. But I have a box full of evidence that could send you both to jail for fraud and conspiracy. So you have a choice. You can write a statement for me, or I can give a statement to the police, along with all of Elena's proof. He was silent for a long time. I need to think, he said finally. You have 24 hours, I told him, and hung up. The next phase of my plan involved my father. He was not a villain like Diana and Peter. He was weak, an enabler. His crime was silence. I knew he loved me, in his own passive way. And I knew he was terrified of my mother. I decided to use that. I went to their house. Diana's car was gone, but my father's was in the driveway. I rang the bell. He opened the door and his face fell when he saw me. Ava, he said, your mother is not here. I know, I said. I came to talk to you. He let me in. We stood awkwardly in the foyer. The house felt cold and empty. Dad? I began, my voice softer than it had been with Peter. I know everything. About Elena, about the trust, about why you both lied to me my whole life. He sank onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, his head in his hands. I am so sorry, Ava, he mumbled. I never wanted any of this. Then why did you let it happen? I asked, the question I had wanted to ask my whole life. Why did you let her treat me like I was nothing? Why did you stand by and let her plan to get rid of me? I was weak, he said, his voice choked with shame. She was so powerful, so convincing. She said it was for the best, that Elena was unstable, that the money would be safer with us. Safer? I repeated, my voice rising. You call a death clause safer? He flinched. I did not know about that part until later, he whispered. Years later, and by then, I was too scared to say anything. She would have ruined me. She has ruined me, I said, my voice breaking. She stole my mother. She stole my childhood. She stole my identity. Tears were streaming down his face now. I know, he wept. I know, and I have to live with that every day. Living with it is not enough, I said, my resolve hardening again. I need you to do something. I need you to choose a side. He looked up at me, his eyes red and pleading. What do you want me to do? I am going to expose her, I said, publicly. And when I do, I want you to stand with me. I want you to tell the truth. He stared at me, his face a mask of terror. She will destroy me, he whispered. She will try, I said. But if you stand with me, you will have something she can never take from you again. Your self-respect. And maybe a daughter. I left him there on the stairs, a broken man faced with an impossible choice. I did not know what he would do. But I had given him the chance to be a father. The rest was up to him. The final piece of my plan was the stage. I needed the right moment, the right audience. Diana cared about one thing more than money: her reputation. Her image as the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect society hostess. I was going to shatter that image into a million pieces. My grandparents had endowed a wing at the local art museum. Every year, the museum held a gala in their honor. It was the biggest social event of the year in our town, and my mother was the chair of the gala committee. It was her crowning achievement, her night to shine. The gala was in 2 weeks. It was the perfect stage. The day before the gala, my Uncle Peter delivered his statement. He had it messengered to my apartment. It was a full confession. He detailed the entire 30-year conspiracy, minimizing his own role and blaming Diana for everything. It was cowardly, but it was exactly what I needed. That evening, my father called me. His voice was quiet but firm. "I will be there, Ava," he said. "I will stand with you." The final pieces were in place. On the night of the gala, I chose my dress carefully. It was a simple, elegant black dress. I did my hair and makeup myself. I did not want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like a woman in control. I arrived at the museum. The place was glittering. Chandeliers, champagne, people in expensive clothes. I saw my mother near the entrance, greeting guests. She was wearing a stunning red gown. She looked like a queen. When she saw me, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ava," she said, her voice like ice. "I am surprised to see you here." "Why would I miss it?" I replied, my voice light. "It is in honor of my grandparents, the ones who loved me enough to leave me a fortune." Her eyes narrowed. "You have made a very big mistake," she whispered, leaning closer. "No," I said, not whispering at all. "You have." I walked past her into the main hall. I saw Clara holding a glass of champagne, laughing with some friends. When she saw me, her laughter died. She gave me a look of pure hatred. I just smiled. I found Aunt June standing by a large painting. She was wearing a simple blue dress and looked completely out of place and completely wonderful. She hugged me. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "I am," I said. "Thank you for being here." "I would not be anywhere else," she said, squeezing my hand. The program began with speeches, the museum director, the mayor. And then it was my mother's turn. She walked to the podium, a vision of grace and confidence. The room fell silent. She began her speech, talking about the importance of art, the generosity of my grandparents, the legacy of family. It was a masterful performance. She was charming, witty, and humble. The audience was captivated. "My parents taught me that family is the most important thing in the world," she said, her voice thick with fake emotion. "They taught me the importance of love, of sacrifice, and of protecting the ones you hold dear." This was my moment. I stood up from my table. I walked toward the stage. A few people turned to look at me, frowning. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, burning with fury. I did not stop. I walked up the small set of stairs and stood next to her at the podium. She tried to block me with her body, but I just moved around her. The microphone was between us. "Excuse me, Mother," I said, my voice ringing out through the silent hall. "I just have a few words to add about family." She grabbed my arm. "Get off this stage," she hissed. "Let go of me," I said, my voice calm but firm. I pulled my arm away. I looked out at the sea of confused and curious faces. "My mother is right," I began. "My grandparents believed in protecting family. That is why they set up a trust for me. But they also knew who my mother was. They knew she needed to be protected from." A gasp went through the room. Diana's face was a mask of rage. "Security!" she shrieked. "Get her out of here." "My name is Ava," I said loudly, speaking quickly before anyone could stop me. "And for 30 years, I believed Diana was my mother, but my real mother was a woman named Elena Reyes, Diana's own aunt's sister." I corrected myself, my nerves getting the better of me for a second. "My grandmother's sister," I clarified, "Diana's aunt. She was forced to give me up. Diana and her husband Robert adopted me. But they did not do it out of love. They did it for money." I saw my father, Robert, standing near the side of the stage. He was pale, but he was looking right at me. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. The trust from my grandparents was supposed to be my security. I continued, my voice growing stronger. But my mother and her brother Peter added a clause. If I died before my 30th birthday, all the money would go to her. The crowd was murmuring now. People were looking at Diana with suspicion. Her perfect facade was cracking. At my 30th birthday party last week, I said, my voice dropping. My mother raised a toast. She looked me in the eye and said, "You have lived enough." The gasp this time was audible and sharp. Everyone stared at Diana. Her face had gone from red with rage to a pasty, sickly white. She thought her 30-year plan was finally coming to fruition, I said, my eyes locked on hers. She thought she would finally get her hands on the money. But she made a mistake. She underestimated me. And she underestimated my real mother, Elena. I reached into my small purse and pulled out a cassette tape. My mother, Elena, spent years gathering proof of Diana's cruelty. She recorded their phone calls. I held up the tape. On this tape, you can hear Diana admitting that she was just using me, that I was an asset, that my only purpose was to make the family wealthy. Diana lunged for the tape, but I was quicker. I held it out of her reach. And it gets worse, I said, my voice ringing with condemnation. I also have letters between Diana and her brother, Peter, plotting how to control me, how to isolate me, how to make sure I never found out the truth. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of Peter's confession. And just yesterday, my Uncle Peter gave me a full signed statement, admitting to the entire conspiracy. I unfolded the paper. He writes, Diana was the mastermind. She saw Ava as nothing more than a financial instrument. Her plan, once Ava turned 30, was to have her declared mentally incompetent, using the family history of Elena's instability as precedent. She planned to become my legal guardian and gain control of the trust that way. The room erupted. The murmurs turned into loud, shocked chatter. Everyone was staring at Diana, their faces a mixture of horror and disgust. "She is lying," Diana screamed, her voice shrill. "This is all lies. She is unstable, just like her mother." "Am I?" I asked calmly. I turned to my father. "Dad, am I lying?" All eyes went to him. He looked terrified. He looked at Diana, who was glaring at him with pure venom. He looked at me, his eyes full of tears. He took a deep breath. "No, Ava," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "You are not lying. Everything you have said is true." It was as if a bomb had gone off in the room. The noise was deafening. Diana looked at my father, her mouth open in a silent scream of betrayal. Then she looked at me. The hatred in her eyes was terrifying, but I was not afraid anymore. I turned back to the audience. My mother, Diana, did not want me to live. She wanted me to exist, quietly, until she could take what was mine. But she failed. I am alive, I am free, and I am not afraid of her anymore. I looked at Diana one last time. Her beautiful red dress was just a costume. Underneath, she was a small, greedy, pathetic woman. Her reign was over. "You have lived enough, Mother," I said, twisting her own words back at her. "You have lived your lie for long enough. It is over." I dropped the microphone onto the podium. The feedback shrieked through the speakers. I walked off the stage, past my weeping father, past the stunned and horrified faces of the guests. I found Aunt June, and we walked out of the museum together, leaving the wreckage of Diana's life behind us. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The story was in the papers the next day. Socialite's 30-year fraud exposed by daughter at charity gala. The museum board asked for Diana's resignation. Her friends stopped calling. The world she had built so carefully crumbled to dust overnight. My father filed for divorce a week later. He moved out of the house and into a small apartment. He called me. "I should have done this years ago," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I am so sorry, Ava, for everything." "I know, Dad," I said. "It was not forgiveness. not yet. But it was a start. Uncle Peter disappeared. He sold his house and moved away. I heard from Aunt June that he was living somewhere in another state, his life a shadow of what it once was. He had chosen to save himself, but he had lost everything else in the process. Clara was perhaps the most pathetic of all. Her entire identity had been built on being the real daughter, the special one. With Diana's fall from grace, Clara's social standing evaporated. Her friends, who were really Diana's friends' children, dropped her. The money she had always taken for granted was suddenly gone, tied up in the divorce. She called me once, about a month after the gala. Her voice was unrecognizable. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a whining desperation. "You ruined everything," she cried. "My life is over because of you." "No, Clara," I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "Your life is what it is because of the choices you and your mother made. You smiled when she told me I had lived enough. You were happy at the thought of my destruction. So do not call me asking for pity. You will not find any here." I hung up the phone. I never heard from her again. I used some of the trust money to start a foundation in my real mother's name, the Elena Reyes Foundation. It provides support for single mothers and women suffering from postpartum depression. Women like her, who were failed by the people who were supposed to protect them. Aunt June is on the board of the foundation. We have become very close. She tells me stories about Elena, about her laughter, her kindness, her strength. Through her, I am finally getting to know the mother I never had. I bought a small house by the sea. It is quiet and peaceful. I have a garden where I grow flowers. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my porch, looking out at the ocean, I think about Diana's words. "You have lived enough." She was wrong. My life had not even begun. All those years in that house, I was not living. I was waiting. Waiting for the day I could finally be free. My 30th birthday was not an ending. It was my real beginning. I have so much more living to do, and I will do it on my own terms, for myself and for the mother who loved me from afar. Her name was Elena, and I am her daughter. I am finally and fully myself. The weeks after the gala were a blur of lawyers and news articles. My father's divorce from Diana was messy. She fought him on every point, trying to cling to the lifestyle she believed she was owed. But the public exposure of her actions had left her with very little leverage. The court was not sympathetic to a woman who had plotted against her own adopted daughter for financial gain. Robert, my father, seemed to get smaller with each passing day, but also lighter. The burden of 30 years of secrets was a heavy one. He started seeing a therapist. He would call me, not to ask for forgiveness, but just to talk. He told me about his week. He asked about my new house. The conversations were stilted at first, full of unspoken words. "I went for a walk on the beach today," I told him during one call. "That sounds nice," he said. There was a long pause. "Your mother, Diana, she never liked the beach. Too much sand." It was a small thing, but it felt significant. He was starting to define himself outside of her. "The foundation had its first fundraiser," I told him another time. "We raised enough to help 10 families. Elena would be so proud of you," he said, his voice thick. I did not know what to say to that. "Thank you," I managed. Aunt June was my rock. She helped me sort through the rest of the items in Elena's storage unit. We found more than just evidence. We found photo albums, pictures of a young Elena, laughing with my grandmother. A picture of her, heavily pregnant, her hands resting on her belly. A picture of a man with kind eyes and a guitar. My father. "He looks happy," I said to June, tracing the outline of his face. "He was," she said softly. "They were very much in love. Your grandparents were wrong to try and stop it. They stole so much joy from the world with their pride." We also found a box of Elena's personal belongings. A pressed flower and a book of poetry. A silver locket. Inside, there was a tiny, faded picture of a newborn baby. Me. Holding that locket, I felt a connection to her that was so profound, It ached. She had kept me with her. Always. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me. "Is this Ava?" A hesitant male voice asked. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" "My name is Daniel," he said. "Daniel Carter. I think you knew my father. His name was Leo." Leo, the musician, my biological father. My hand tightened on the phone. I did not know him," I said. "But I know who he is." "I am his son," Daniel said. "Your brother, a half-brother, I guess." I sank into a chair. A brother? I had a brother. "My father passed away a few years ago," Daniel continued. "He told me about your mother, Elena. He said he was young and stupid and that he let her family scare him away. He regretted it his whole life. He tried to find her, to find you, but he never could." "Diana made sure of that," I said, my voice hollow. "He left me a box," Daniel said, "full of songs he wrote for Elena. And for you. He never stopped thinking about you. I saw the news about what happened at the gala. I saw your name. I knew it had to be you." We talked for over an hour. He told me about our father. He was a music teacher. He had a wife, Daniel's mother, who had known all about Elena and had encouraged him to find me. He was a good man who had made a youthful mistake and paid for it for the rest of his life. A week later, Daniel drove to my house. He looked like the picture. He had the same kind eyes. He brought the box of songs, lyrics scrawled on napkins and notebooks. Songs of love, of regret, of a daughter he never knew. We sat on my porch and he played one for me on his guitar. The music was beautiful and sad. And for the first time, I cried not with anger or loss, but with a strange sense of peace. I had a family. A real one. Forged not from lies and greed, but from truth and love. The legal battles with Diana dragged on. My lawyers, funded by my now secure trust, were relentless. We filed a civil suit against her and Peter for fraud and emotional distress. Peter, wanting to avoid further public humiliation, settled immediately. He signed over a significant portion of his assets to Elena's foundation. It was a hollow victory, but it was something. Diana, however, refused to settle. She was going to fight. She countersued me for defamation. Her lawyer claimed I was mentally unstable, using my search for my biological family as proof of my obsession and delusion. It was exhausting. It was ugly. But I refused to back down. "She will not win," I told my lawyer. "She will not take anything else from me." The day of the deposition was tense. I had to face her across a table in a sterile conference room. She looked older. The confidence was gone, replaced by a brittle, defensive anger. Clara was with her, looking sullen and lost. Her lawyer started the questioning. He was aggressive, trying to paint me as a bitter, vengeful adoptee who had fabricated a conspiracy to steal her family's money. "Isn't it true, Miss Ava, that you have always been jealous of your sister, Clara?" he asked. "No," I said calmly. "I was not jealous of Clara." "Isn't it true that you resented your mother, Diana, for providing you with a life of privilege?" "I resented her for lying to me every day of my life," I replied. He tried to twist my words, to trap me. But I had the truth on my side, and I had the evidence. My lawyer's turn came. He started gently. He had Diana confirm the details of my adoption. He had her confirm the existence of the trust. Then he produced the first cassette tape. "Mrs. Diana," he said, "is this your voice?" He pressed play, the room filled with the sound of her young, cruel voice telling Elena she was a ghost. Diana's face went rigid. I do not recall that conversation," she stammered. My lawyer produced another tape, and another, each one a nail in the coffin of her lies. Then he produced Peter's signed confession. "Your own brother has admitted to the conspiracy, Mrs. Diana," he said. "He states here that you were the architect of the entire scheme." "He is a liar," she shrieked. "He is trying to save himself." Finally, my lawyer produced the letters. The ones Elena had written to me, all returned to sender. He placed them on the table, a heartbreaking pile of unanswered love. 30 years of letters, Mrs. Diana, he said, his voice quiet but powerful. 30 years you kept a mother from her child, and a child from her mother. For what? Money? Diana stared at the letters. For the first time, her composure completely shattered. She began to sob. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. Tears of a loser. Clara just stared at the table, her face blank. The reality of her mother's actions laid bare in that sterile room was too much for her to process. The lawsuit was dropped the next day. Diana's lawyer knew they had no case. She was ruined, financially and socially. The divorce settlement left her with a fraction of her former wealth. She had to sell the big house. I heard she moved into a small condo across town. She became a recluse. The queen was dethroned, left with nothing but her bitterness. My life, on the other hand, was just beginning. Daniel and I became close. I met his mother, a warm, wonderful woman who welcomed me with open arms. I had a family. I had my Aunt June. I had my father, who was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding himself and our relationship. One day, he came to visit me at my house by the sea. We walked along the beach, the waves crashing at our feet. "I am proud of you, Ava," he said, looking out at the horizon. "You are stronger than I ever was." "I had to be," I said. "I know," he said, "and I am sorry for that." I stopped walking and looked at him. The guilt was still there in his eyes, but there was something else too. A glimmer of peace. "I am starting to let it go, Dad," I told him. And I realized it was true. The anger was fading, replaced by a quiet strength. I cannot change the past, but I can build a new future. He smiled, a real smile this time. "I would like to be a part of that future," he said, "if you will let me." "I would like that too," I said. We continued our walk side by side. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. It was a new day, a new life. I never forgot the words that started it all. "You have lived enough." They were meant to be a curse, a death sentence, but they had become my liberation. I had lived enough of their lies. I had lived enough of their control. I had lived enough of their poison. Now I was just living. And it was more than enough. It was everything. Life settled into a new rhythm. It was a quiet rhythm, dictated by the tides and the seasons, not by the tense, brittle schedule of Diana's world. I found joy in simple things. The warmth of the sun on my face. The taste of salt in the air. The sound of Daniel's guitar as he played me another one of our father's songs. I dedicated myself to the foundation. We expanded our services, opening a temporary shelter for mothers and children in crisis. I named it Elena's House. On the day it opened, Aunt June, my father, and Daniel were there with me. We cut a simple ribbon. There were no reporters, no galas, just a small group of people dedicated to making a difference. My father made a large donation to the foundation. "It is the least I can do," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is her money, really. It should be used to honor her." He started volunteering at the shelter, fixing leaky faucets and painting walls. He was quiet and diligent. The women there did not know his story. They just knew him as Robert, the kind man who was good with a hammer. He was finding his own way to atone. One day, while I was working at the shelter, a young woman came in with a newborn baby. She was terrified. Her family had thrown her out. She had nowhere to go. She reminded me so much of the stories I had heard about Elena. I sat with her. I listened to her story. I told her she was safe. I told her we would help her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her eyes full of tears. "Why are you so kind to me?" "Because a long time ago," I said, "a woman just like you needed help and did not get it. Her name was Elena. This place is for her. And for you. In that moment, I felt the last vestiges of my anger toward Diana dissolve. It was not forgiveness. I would never forgive what she did. But it was release. Her poison could no longer touch me. I was turning it into something good. Something that healed. I kept in touch with Sarah, of course. She was my anchor through the whole ordeal. She would come visit me at my beach house, and we would drink wine on the porch and laugh. "Look at you," she said one evening, gesturing at my peaceful home. "The queen of your own castle." "It is better than being a pawn in someone else's," I said. "To that," she said, raising her glass. "And to living more than enough." We clinked our glasses together. The sound was clear and bright. I did see Clara one last time. It was a few years after the gala. I was at a grocery store in a town a few miles from mine. I saw her in the cereal aisle. She looked diminished. Her clothes were cheap. Her hair was messy. The entitled confidence she had always worn like a second skin was gone. She looked tired and defeated. She saw me at the same time. Her eyes widened with a flicker of the old resentment. Then it was replaced by something else. Shame. She quickly turned her head and hurried down the aisle, pushing her cart. I did not follow her. I did not say anything. There was nothing left to say. Her punishment was not jail time or a public flogging. It was this: a life of quiet mediocrity. A life without the privilege and power she had always taken for granted. For someone like Clara, it was a fate worse than death. I paid for my groceries and went home. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel pity. I felt nothing. She was just a ghost from a past life. A life that was no longer mine. My relationship with my father continued to grow. It was a slow, careful process. We were like two people learning a new language, the language of honesty. He told me about his marriage to Diana, how he had been dazzled by her at first, then intimidated, then trapped. I was a coward, he admitted one day as we were planting roses in my garden. There is no other word for it. I let her bully me. I let her bully you. You are not a coward anymore, I said, handing him a trowel. He looked at me, his eyes grateful. Because of you, he said. You taught me how to be brave. My brother Daniel became my best friend. We had a shared history, a shared loss, but we did not dwell on it. We built a new story together. We celebrated our birthdays together. Real celebrations full of laughter and bad jokes. We went on trips, we introduced our friends. He was the brother I never knew I had, and I could not imagine my life without him. On what would have been Elena's 60th birthday, Daniel and I, along with Aunt June and my father, went to the small, quiet cemetery where she was buried. Her grave was simple, just her name and the dates. We brought flowers. We stood there in silence for a while. I think she knows, Aunt June said finally, her voice soft. I think she is at peace. I placed my hand on the cool stone. I am living a good life, Mom, I whispered. I am happy. A breeze rustled the leaves of the trees overhead. It felt like an answer. As we were leaving, my father hung back. He placed a single white rose on the grave. I am sorry, Elena, he said, his voice barely audible. For everything. I waited for him at the gate. He came and stood beside me, and we watched as Daniel and June walked toward the car. It is a beautiful day, he said. Yes, I said. It is. We did not need to say anything more. My life is full now, full of love and purpose and peace. The ghosts of the past have been laid to rest. I have my own family, my own home, my own life. A life I built from the ruins of a lie. Sometimes a new mother at the shelter will ask me about my own family. I used to hesitate. Now I just smile. I have a wonderful family, I tell them. I have a brother who plays the guitar, an aunt who makes the best apple pie, and a father who can fix anything. And I have a mother who watches over me and who taught me how to be strong. I do not mention Diana or Clara. They are not a part of my story anymore. They are just a footnote in someone else's sad, bitter tale. My story is about a woman named Elena, who never stopped loving her daughter. It is about a woman named Ava, who learned to fight for the truth. It is a story of survival, of justice, and of the enduring power of love. It is a life more than well lived. It is a life reclaimed. And it is all mine. The years passed. Elena's house flourished. We opened 2 more shelters in neighboring towns. The foundation became a well-respected organization, a beacon of hope for women who felt they had none. I was no longer just Ava, the woman from the scandal. I was Ava Reyes, the founder of Elena's house. I had taken my mother's name, and in doing so, I had fully claimed my own identity. My father, Robert, eventually sold his small apartment and bought a cottage near my house. He became the unofficial handyman for the entire neighborhood. He seemed to find a quiet purpose in mending things. Fences, screen doors, broken hearts. He and I found a comfortable rhythm, a gentle friendship that was a quiet miracle. One afternoon, he came over with a small, dusty box. "I found this when I was cleaning out the last of my storage," he said, placing it on my kitchen table. "I think it belongs to you." I opened it. Inside was a collection of my childhood drawings, clumsy crayon figures, lopsided houses. And in the corner of each one, in my childish scrawl, was my name, Ava. Tucked underneath them was a small, worn teddy bear. "I remember this," I whispered, picking up the bear. One of its button eyes was loose. "You wouldn't sleep without it," my father said, his voice soft. Diana hated it. She said it was shabby. She tried to throw it away a dozen times. "I always fished it out of the trash and gave it back to you." I looked at him, my eyes filling with tears. It was such a small act of defiance, a tiny rebellion in a lifetime of submission. But it was something. It was a flicker of love in a cold, dark house. "Thank you, Dad," I said, hugging the old bear. "I should have done more," he said, his voice full of the old regret. "You did what you could," I said. And for the first time, I think we both believed it. Daniel got married. His wife, Maria, was a warm, vibrant woman who fit into our small, strange family perfectly. At their wedding, my father walked Maria's mother down the aisle. Aunt June cried during the vows, and I gave a toast. "To love," I said, raising my glass. "The real kind. The kind that is honest and brave and lasts forever." I looked at Daniel and Maria, their faces shining with happiness. I looked at my father, smiling at Aunt June. I felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was family. This was home. Life was not without its shadows. I would sometimes have nightmares about my childhood home, about Diana's cold eyes and Clara's cruel smile. But the nightmares were fading. They were being replaced by new memories. Good memories. I never sought out news of Diana, but sometimes news found me. I heard through a distant cousin that she had become ill, that she was alone. Clara, the cousin said, had married a man with a modest income and moved to a different part of the country. She rarely visited her mother. The golden child had finally abandoned her creator. I felt a brief, distant pang of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. Diana had sown the seeds of her own desolation. Now she was reaping the harvest. One day, I received a letter. The handwriting on the envelope was spidery and weak, but I recognized it instantly. It was from Diana. I almost threw it away. I stood over the recycling bin for a full minute, the letter in my hand. But curiosity, or perhaps a need for final closure, made me open it. The letter was short, just a few lines on a piece of cheap stationery. "I am dying," it said. "I want to see you." There was no apology, no remorse, just a command. Even at the end, she was still trying to control me. I showed the letter to Aunt June. "What should I do?" I asked. She read it, her lips tightening. "You do not owe her anything, Ava," she said. Not a thing. I know, I said. But you think seeing her will give you closure? She asked gently. I do not know, I admitted. Maybe. Or maybe I just want to see her one last time, to see what she has become. I decided to go. Not for her. For me. The condo was in a drab, anonymous complex. The paint was peeling on the building. It was a world away from the grand house I had grown up in. I knocked on the door. After a long moment, it opened a crack. A woman I barely recognized peered out. She was thin and frail, her skin sallow. Her once perfectly coiffed hair was sparse and gray. It was Diana. She saw me and her eyes, the only part of her that was still the same, widened. You came, she rasped. You asked me to, I said. She opened the door wider and shuffled back into the room. The condo was small and cluttered. It smelled of sickness and stale air. There were no pictures on the walls, no signs of a life well lived. Just a television flickering in the corner. She sank into a worn armchair. I remained standing by the door. So, she said, her voice a dry rustle. You have done well for yourself. I see your name in the papers sometimes. Saint Ava, the philanthropist. The old bitterness was still there, sharp as ever. I am happy, I said simply. She laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Are you? With your broken family and your charity cases? You could have had everything. I do have everything, I said. I have love, I have peace, I have the truth. What do you have, Diana? I used her name. Not mom, not mother, just Diana. The name of a stranger. She glared at me, her eyes burning with a lifetime of resentment. I have a daughter who betrayed me. She spat. No, I said, my voice steady. You have a daughter you never knew. And you have a daughter you created. Clara, where is she? The fire in her eyes flickered and died. She has her own life now, she mumbled, looking away. She is busy. The lie was pathetic. We both knew it. Clara had abandoned her. The one person she had truly loved had left her to rot. We sat in silence for a long moment. The only sound was the drone of the television. Why did you ask me to come here? I asked finally. She looked at me, her face a crumpled mask of pride and pain. I wanted to see if you were sorry, she whispered. I stared at her, incredulous. After everything she had done, she thought I should be sorry. Sorry for what? I asked. For taking what was mine? For telling the truth? For living? She did not answer. She just stared at her hands, which were twisted together in her lap. I realized then why I had come. It was not for closure. It was to confirm what I already knew. This woman was incapable of remorse. She was a black hole of narcissism, incapable of seeing beyond her own selfish desires. There was nothing left to say. No grand confrontation. No tearful confession. Just a sad, empty room and a sad, empty woman. I turned to leave. Ava, she said, her voice small. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I did not turn around. The day you were born, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Elena let me hold you. You were so small. You wrapped your whole hand around my finger. She paused. I waited, my heart suddenly tight in my chest. Was this it? Was this the moment of humanity I had secretly been hoping for? And all I could think, she continued, her voice turning hard and cold again, was how much you were going to be worth. The last flicker of hope in my heart died. I opened the door. Goodbye, Diana, I said. I walked out of the condo and did not look back. I got in my car and drove away, the drab building shrinking in my rearview mirror. I did not cry. I did not feel anger. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of release. It was truly, finally, over. When I got back to my house, the sun was setting. I walked out onto my porch and took a deep breath of the clean, salt air. My phone rang. It was Daniel. "Hey, sis," he said. "How are you?" "I am good," I said, and the words were true. "I am really good." "Just wanted to see if you were free for dinner this weekend," he said. "Maria is making lasagna." "I would love that," I said, smiling. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I stood there watching the last sliver of sun dip below the horizon. The sky was awash in color. It was beautiful. Diana died a few weeks later. My father called to tell me. He was the only one at her funeral, besides a priest who did not know her. Clara did not come. I did not go. I did not mourn. I went to Elena's house. I spent the day playing with the children, helping the mothers fill out job applications and listening to their stories. I spent the day creating something good in the world. That evening, I walked on the beach. The moon was full, casting a silver path across the water. I thought about the two women who had shaped my life. Elena, who had given me life and love, even from a distance. And Diana, who had given me nothing but lies and a reason to fight. I had taken the worst of what she had done to me and turned it into the best of who I am. Her legacy was a small, lonely grave. My mother's legacy was a house full of hope. I looked up at the moon, and I thought of Elena. I thought of my father, and Daniel, and June, and Sarah, my family, my real family. I had lived enough of a nightmare to appreciate the dream I was now living. And I knew, with the certainty that filled my entire being, that my life was just getting started. I had so much more to do, so much more to give, so much more to live,